Hey guys, another unexpected video today with the whiteboard. I wasn't even supposed to record today, I was supposed to keep hacking on my target. But I wanted to make this video because I've seen a few other people kind of delving into this topic of burnout recently in the hacking community. And I've seen a few people talking about it, and I wanted to just add a bit of it from myself and some of the strategies that I use to avoid burnout and basically keep longevity. It all kind of comes down to motivation and a bit of psychology. I'm going to talk about the studies. I'm not a psychologist, but yeah, I'm going to give you the bro science version of it basically and just kind of apply it to book bounty. So how can we can kind of rewire our motivation to actually be more likely to hack, to kind of enjoy the actual act of hacking instead of just enjoying the basically revenue side of it. And it all comes down to basically these two things: intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. So intrinsic motivation is the things that come from us, basically. They come from inside of us. They're kind of like our personal ambitions, our like desires and the things that we enjoy. Versus extrinsic motivation is the motivation that we basically get from the outside world. So it's external versus internal. This can be like, rewards, it can be status as well, popularity, obviously, money, fame. These type of things are extrinsic. So these are two kind of competing forces of motivation inside of us, and they motivate the actions that we're going to take in our daily lives and how much we enjoy the tasks that we want to do. So there was this pretty famous study, I think it was about markers or something, I don't know, it was about drawing, but I just turned it into the way that's more understandable for me. But it was about children and how basically you can motivate children to do certain things. So at the start of the study, we say we have like a child that liked reading. The child liked reading this book, and the child, this is the child drawing here. The child liked reading the book for say hour and a half a day. So they enjoyed reading already. Now we want to say reward the child for this activity. So we would give the child, say, a sweet or like, a piece of like, something like a pack of Haribos or something, whenever the child read for an hour. So, a pretty normal thing that a parent would do is give the child something, a reward for reading. So we see these two competing forces here again. So we have the intrinsic motivation, the child enjoys reading. So before we gave the child a reward, the child really enjoyed reading the book because that's what they wanted to do. They had a desire to read the book and they wanted to, get through all the chapters, etc. Then we've introduced an extrinsic reward. So the child has been given the sweet, and now their brain is like, oh, so now for this activity, I'm getting this reward. So it starts to rewire their motivation to be extrinsic. And let's say we do this for, weeks, months, or whatever. The child's getting the sweet, and it was rewiring the motivation. The motivation is starting to shift. It's starting to shift from something intrinsic to something extrinsic because we've given the child an expected reward for the piece of activity, right? Now, what happens if, say, months later, you're like, okay, now we're not going to give the sweet to you anymore for reading? You'd expect the child to go back to reading the book, right? But what actually happens a lot of the time is the child will stop reading altogether because the reward pathway is no longer there. So because they're not getting the sweet for reading anymore, the desire to read the book is not there. And this is very important. So this shows you kind of the dynamics between this intrinsic and extrinsic motivation and how this can lead, especially in book bounty, to this lack of motivation and, burnout with all the work. And in book bounty, the extrinsic motivation is made extremely obvious to you the minute you start, and it takes the form of this. So this is the reward summary table for like a random program. I think this is Snapchat. Well, anyway, you can see that the rewards are very highlighted to you. And what I've personally found is that when you're a beginner, these rewards are kind of cool, but they don't mean anything at the start, right? Because we haven't really experienced any reward. So the reward pathway hasn't really been configured yet. But as you get a little bit more experience and you start, finding more vulnerabilities, you start to kind of develop an expectation for a reward for the certain amount of work you're getting. And your motivation, like the motivation of the child, might start shifting to an extrinsic motivation. This is often what happens when people get a job. When they get a job, they could originally have liked the activity, but because they start getting paid by the hour, they often actually start disliking it over time. And this is generally what happens in most employment because you're getting a reward for what you're doing. And this can also happen to us with book bounty. The thing that's absolutely killer in book bounty, the thing that can absolutely ruin you, is that in book bounty, the reward can just go away randomly, right? when you're doing bug bounty, there's going to be times where you literally get like nothing. And during those periods of time, when you've bound your reward path to these extrinsic rewards of getting money, then you basically start kind of losing the motivation. You start losing the motivation because the reward's not there anymore. So you turn into basically the child that, you originally liked hacking. You did it because it was fun. You started building up the rewards. You started finding vulnerabilities. You started getting pretty consistent with it. So you started reporting every once in a while. You could kind of predict how much money you were going to get when you reported the vulnerability. When this happens and you start building up this reward pathway, you're getting validation from other people as well for making this money, you're pretty happy. What happens when you start entering a period where you're not making any money? Well, your motivation is going to significantly go down. When you get stuck on a target, which is inevitable, then you're going to get hit with very low amounts of motivation. So how do we prevent that? And basically, my idea is you need to do what you want to actually do. Bug bounty is one of the very few industries actually where doing exactly what you want to do often gives you the best results. In other industries, you might have to compromise. You might have to go and train your weaknesses or improve in certain things you're weak at. In bug bounty, you actually really don't have to. You can focus on exactly what you want to do and what you enjoy doing. To give you an example, let's say you hate client-side attacks. I don't like client-side attacks. Let's say you don't like client-side attacks, right? You don't like JavaScript or whatever, and you just don't want to read any JavaScript. Well, you can do that. You're allowed to do that. You can literally ignore JavaScript forever. You can just not even open the dev tables to them. Would you miss vulnerabilities? Of course you will. Yeah, you will. You will miss vulnerabilities. I won't even lie to you. But can you still be a phenomenal hacker? Absolutely, you can. You can focus completely on server-side vulnerabilities. You can focus completely on different types of misconfigurations. You can go into cache poisoning or whatever. You can really do whatever you want to, and you should focus specifically on building strengths where you actually want to build strengths in. I really like hacking infrastructure. I really like enjoying learning about a third-party service that's being implemented, kind of learning about how the company implemented it, and kind of doing like a mental diff of what it's supposed to look like versus what it actually looks like. That's what I really enjoy doing. And this is what I'm honestly going to push to you. This is actually what I pushed in one of my original videos, and it was about target selection. So target selection is also one of the ways you can avoid burnout. And the things that I really recommend to people is when you're trying to pick a target, you want to focus on targets that you personally find very interesting. And what this is going to do is basically when we have an interesting target that we want to actually look at ourselves, we could basically take the extrinsic reward. Okay, the intrinsic reward is there, but we now have an extra intrinsic bit of motivation that, oh, this app is actually fun to use. We enjoy using it, The original program that I got started on was the Atlassian program. And the reason was because I actually used it in my personal life. I used to be a game developer, and I used Atlassian products to basically coordinate my game. And I thought it was very fun that I could now basically go in and understand how it worked. Honestly, for a lot of reasons, I wouldn't recommend this program. I had some interesting experience with them, but it was how I got started, and it was quite an enjoyable experience for me. Now, another thing is when you're picking a target, I like picking targets that are innovative and specifically that are often pushing kind of the boundaries of technology. And this is also very interesting for me because when you have these completely new implementations, it kind of sparks a bit of curiosity. You're like, how is this actually implemented? And we were taking away our motivation from extrinsic to intrinsic because, that like problem solving, like curious part of our brain is coming in and saying, hey, I want to find out how this actually works. And you want to pick something that's kind of relevant to you that you kind of use on a daily basis. Kind of just mentioned already, but target selection is generally one of the most underappreciated aspects of bug bounty. And I will honestly say that the target that you pick can make the difference between you earning $0 and you earning 6, 7 figures in bug bounty. Genuinely, it's that important. If you pick a good target that you enjoy hacking on, that you build a relationship with, that's honestly the road to success in bug bounty. So really, you should be spending a lot of time thinking about what targets you want to hack on. Please don't just look at the rewards table or look at, the specific things. Look at, the company as a whole. Do you like this company? Would you want to work for them, for example? These are the type of things that I consider before I start hacking on them, because I consider motivation very important to my bug bounty journey as well as my longevity. Another thing is trying to shift our mindsets. when you're normally, you're hacking or whatever, you're probably going to have this mindset. It might be subconscious, it might not even be you thinking about it, but it might be like, I'm hacking on this target because I'm trying to find a vulnerability. Now, I've highlighted in red because this is an extrinsic motivator. So this is basically going to tell your brain, okay, so we're hacking on this target to find a vulnerability so that we can get money and then we can go on holidays or whatever and get status from people. That's extrinsic. And it's actually been shown in a lot of studies that when you give a reward for an activity, if that reward has nothing to do with the activity, so it's a completely like outside reward, then that's like the worst. That can actually destroy your motivation completely when that reward goes away. But when the reward is actually kind of interlinked with the activity, it's not too bad. So when you have like the child reading the book, let's say we gave them like an extra book for like every time they finished the one that they were currently on. That's actually not that bad because the reward is actually tied like into the activity. So it's kind of relevant to them and it actually encourages them to do it more versus trying to find money like this. So the mindset that I try to have whenever I'm approaching a target is kind of this curious mindset where I'm approaching them in a kind of mindset where I'm trying to learn, basically. I'm trying to learn how they implemented this because genuinely I want to see, if there's an interesting feature. I'm like, okay, well, how did they make this feature work? How, did they manage all this processing? Where is this being computed? Is this client side? Is it server side? If it's client side, then how is it secured? If it's server side, then what does the request look like? And I'm genuinely very interested in those type of things. It's probably easier because I am studying to be a software engineer. So I'm in university and I enjoy looking at these web applications and figuring out, like what are the best practices nowadays? What are these companies doing? And I really enjoy doing that. And that's honestly the mindset shift that I really wanted to take on is if you're trying to avoid burnout, focusing on finding the vulnerability is often the worst thing for motivation. It feels like it shouldn't be. It feels like it should be the thing. You're focusing on the vulnerability, you're focusing on what actually matters to you. But when you do that and you don't get the vulnerability, your brain will just get completely demotivated. Versus if you kind of shift yourself to say, I'm learning from this, then you're going to basically win no matter what because you're going to learn about it, you're going to figure it out, and you're going to understand it. And plus, that's the best way to find vulnerabilities anyway. So by doing that, you're doing the best thing anyway, and you're keeping your motivation high, which is, it's phenomenal. It's like obsessing over finding the vulnerability gets you like much worse results than just being curious about people. And then last thing is, the stuff of balance. And not like the soft stuff, not like getting a hobby or something, but balance like within the work basically. So to kind of counterbalance all of this hacking stuff, you want to do some stuff on the side, which is kind of like charitable, basically. So the thing I do, which is teaching others, is I find is very fulfilling because I'm kind of spreading what I've learned. And it's something to do with bug bounty. It's still something to do with bounty, but it has basically no extrinsic reward because I'm just here talking to you and you're just watching the video for free. So it doesn't really have an extrinsic reward for me. I'm just doing it because I genuinely enjoy teaching. And another thing is to share your progress. So if you do find something, you want to share it, you want to tell people about it, especially within the hacker community, because that's going to build you up friends and it's going to get you known. And that's something that's quite personally satisfying to me as well. Another thing is, community, build up relationship with other bug bounty hunters, see how they're doing, work together, collaborate every once in a while. And I am building a community for us. Don't worry, I'm working on it at the moment. It's going to come soon. I know I said June, but it's going to happen soon. Well, yeah, figure out a community and kind of collaborate with people. And lastly, I don't know what your attitudes on this are, but vulnerability disclosure programs. So basically hacking for free every once in a while. I would only do this on things that I'm particularly interested in or things that I'm kind of, motivated to do. But this can also be very fun sometimes, and there's basically no reward for doing it. So it's basically purely intrinsic. And yeah, I guess the last point is longevity. And I remember this is quote from, I think, Henry Ford, which is the difference between winning and losing is often not quitting. And I think that's a very good quote for bug bounty. Honestly, I think if you spend long enough on any target, you're basically guaranteed to find a vulnerability. I know that sounds weird, but I've personally found this myself where no matter what target is, no matter what level of security they are, if I just spent enough time on it, then I would basically find a vulnerability. So the amount of time you spend, basically the amount of time you're in the game for, is basically how well you're gonna be doing. So staying in the game, staying sane is basically what we need to do. And I've kind of given you the tactics for it. That is video you can implement for it. And kind of doing a summary basically is that you basically need to start hacking the way you want to. You need to start choosing the targets that actually give you the fun, and you need to kind of deprioritize specifically this action of finding vulnerabilities versus this action of learning from your target and basically being curious, because those are the things that are actually going to level you up and are going to keep you in the game. And yeah, hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, then leave a like, subscribe, leave a comment. That's it for me. Thanks for watching, and happy hunting.